Welcome to another deep dive. And, you've really outdone yourself with this one.
Oh,
These excerpts from Ian McGilchrist's The Matter with Things, this book, well, it's heavy stuff, but fascinating. Definitely
it's a
fascinating.
real door opener, that's for sure. Gets you
Yeah.
thinking about how we experience the world. What even is reality.
hmm
And McGilchrist, he tackles this through the lens of,
The brain.
the brain,
Yeah.
specifically the differences between the left and right hemispheres.
And he argues that these two hemispheres, they don't just process information differently.
Right, it's not just about left brain logic, right brain creativity kind of simplification.
It's deeper than that. He's saying they actually perceive reality in fundamentally different ways.
Exactly. And that one hemisphere, the right one, might actually be a more reliable guide to truth.
Whoa, hold on. That's a big statement. We're going to need to unpack that. But first, can we define what we mean by hemispheric asymmetry?
Sure, that's the idea that the two halves of our brain, they've evolved to specialize in different tasks. Think of it like the left hemisphere. It's the master organizer.
Okay, like the one who loves making lists and color coding their calendar.
Exactly. It analyzes, categorizes, breaks things down into manageable pieces, loves details.
So very much the logic and control center. What about the right hemisphere then?
The right hemisphere is more about the big picture, seeing connections, context, the stuff the left hemisphere might miss.
More intuitive.
Way more. It's comfortable with ambiguity, with nuance, the fuzzy stuff that the left hemisphere tries to neatly define.
So it's like the left hemisphere is building with Legos, very precise, while the right hemisphere is painting a vast landscape.
I love that analogy, and McGilchrist argues that this broader, more holistic way of seeing that's so characteristic of the right hemisphere, well, it's essential for really understanding the deeper meaning of things. He uses this really powerful example of a patient named Mike.
Oh, tell me about Mike.
Mike was an actuary, so very left hemisphere dominant in his thinking. He suffered damage to his right hemisphere, and what happened was he could only experience half of his world.
What do you mean half?
Literally half. He'd neglect the left side of his plate, the left side of his body, even his visual field. He only saw the right side.
Wow. So his left hemisphere was hyper-focused, but he was missing the complete picture, the context.
Precisely.
hmm
And what this tells us is that attention isn't passive. It shapes our reality. And the left hemisphere's laser focus,
Yeah.
while great for manipulating objects and, doing taxes,
Right, very useful for certain tasks.
but it can lead to this fragmented, static view of the world. We miss the forest for the trees.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Our modern world, so much emphasis on data, logic, individual achievement. Are we overemphasizing the left hemisphere's way of seeing?
McGilchrist argues that we are. And as a result, we're ending up with a limited understanding of truth. Because the left hemisphere wants to break things down into these neat categories, right? Define everything explicitly.
But isn't that how we learn? We label things, categorize them, put them in boxes.
Sure, that's part of it.
Yeah.
But McGilchrist uses this concept of the limit case to illustrate why that's not the whole story. Imagine a beautiful tapestry, very complex. The limit case would be like looking at just one thread, isolated from the whole.
Oh, you'd miss the pattern, the context, the beauty of the entire piece.
Exactly. And that's what he's saying about focusing solely on explicit literal meanings.
Yeah.
We're missing the richness, the interconnectedness that the right hemisphere excels at, that implicit metaphorical meaning.
The tapestry, not just the thread.
Right. And there's more. Did you know that damage to the right hemisphere is way more likely to cause visual hallucinations?
Really, so it's not just emotions and intuition. The right hemisphere is actually involved in constructing our visual reality.
Exactly. It's deeply involved in how we perceive the world around us, not just interpret it. And that's not all. Think about empathy, those complex emotions that connect us to others.
Guilt, shame, responsibility.
All right, hemisphere stuff. It's like the seat of our moral compass.
This raises a big question then. If we're so focused on logic, data, individual achievement, all those left hemisphere strengths, are we neglecting those crucial right hemisphere qualities, those things that connect us?
That's exactly what McGilchrist calls left hemisphere chauvinism. We overvalue one way of thinking and undervalue the other. But as we've seen, that right hemisphere perspective, it's vital for creativity, for innovation, for seeing how everything is interconnected.
This reminds me of that Steve Jobs quote, how he said, creativity is just connecting things.
Yeah, he talked about how creative people, they don't feel like they're inventing. They're just seeing something that was already there, connecting the dots. That's the right hemisphere at work.
We need that broad vision to make those connections, to see the potential in things that the left hemisphere, with its narrow focus, might just dismiss.
And this leads into one of McGilchrist's most fascinating points,
Yeah.
his take on truth. He challenges the idea that truth is this fixed, objective thing out there waiting for us to discover it.
Wait, so he's saying there's no objective truth, that it's all subjective.
It's more nuanced than that. He's saying that truth is a process, an encounter, a relationship with the world. And that right hemisphere, with its ability to grasp the whole, well, it's crucial to that process.
I can see how the left hemisphere would struggle with that idea. It
Right.
wants clear definitions, concrete facts, black and white, not shades of gray.
Right, it wants to define truth as a set of propositions, like building blocks in a logical structure. But that leads to a very limited view.
It's like trying to understand a symphony just by analyzing the individual notes, isn't it? You miss the emotion, the beauty, the overall experience.
Exactly. The right hemisphere, though, it experiences truth as this dynamic relationship, an unfolding process of understanding.
So not about arriving at a fixed answer, but engaging in this ongoing journey of discovery. It's the difference between memorizing a map and actually exploring a landscape, right? One gives you a flat, static view. The other is this dynamic, immersive experience.
I love that. And McGilchrist argues we need both. The analysis of the map, the experience of the landscape, the left hemisphere's categorization, and the right hemisphere's holistic vision.
It's like how Newtonian mechanics works great for our everyday world, but when you get down to the subatomic level.
You need quantum mechanics, different models of truth for different levels of understanding.
And speaking of different levels of understanding, McGilchrist also tackles a pretty weighty topic in these excerpts.
Oh, you mean?
The problem of evil. And he doesn't shy away from complexity, does he? He even draws on religious and philosophical sources to challenge that idea of evil as just the absence of good.
Right, he doesn't settle for simple answers. Instead, he proposes that evil is, well, it's a necessary opposite, a force in its own right, essential for the existence of good.
So not that evil is good, but that its existence allows for the possibility of good.
Think of it like light and shadow. You can't have one without the other.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So without darkness, we can't fully appreciate the light.
And without the experience of pain, how could we truly understand joy?
So experiencing evil, or at least the possibility of it, gives depth and meaning to our experience of good. This is pretty deep stuff.
It is, and he ties it back to free will. He suggests that a truly loving God would allow for the possibility of rejecting love, which in turn makes evil possible.
It suggests that even in the face of suffering and darkness, there's this deeper meaning at play, a potential for growth and transformation that we couldn't have without the existence of evil.
It's definitely a challenging concept to grapple with, but it speaks to the complexity of reality, doesn't it? And it reminds us that our left hemisphere desire to categorize everything neatly as good or bad, well, it might be missing the point.
Okay, I think we've covered some seriously complex territory here. We've touched on hemispheric asymmetry, the nature of truth, even the problem of evil. What else does McGilchrist explore in these excerpts?
Well, he dives into how our perception of time changes as we age, which I'm guessing is something we can both relate to.
Oh, absolutely. Remember when summers seemed to last forever? Now the years just fly by. What causes that? Is it just because we have more experiences to compare to as we get older?
There's more to it than that. McGilchrist points to three key factors that contribute to this phenomenon: our shifting emotional relationship to the past and future, our ability to be truly present in the moment, and the role of novelty in our experience.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. Let's unpack those factors.
Let's. But first, are you ready for a little brain break?
Always ready for a brain break, especially after that whirlwind tour of McGilchrist's ideas.
Sure.
We'll be right back to delve into the mysteries of time perception. Stay tuned.
So those three factors about how our perception of time changes, they're all intertwined. Really fascinating stuff.
Right before the break, we were talking about how our experience of time shifts as we age, and those three factors McGilchrist highlights.
Our emotional relationship to time, past, and future, how present we are, and the impact of novelty.
Okay, let's start with the emotions around time then. How does that change as we get older?
Well, cast your mind back to childhood. What was the future like then?
It felt limitless, full of possibility. No burden of regrets, or worries about what might come.
Exactly. The past, it held less weight to. Just a short string of memories compared to the vast unknown ahead.
But that balance shifts as we get older, doesn't it?
It does. We gather more experiences, good and bad. The future starts to feel more finite. especially as we become aware of our own mortality.
Right, and the past can feel heavier somehow.
The past looms larger. We might dwell on choices we made, things we wish we'd done differently, or even just yearn for simpler times.
So we're essentially spending more time mentally in the past and future, which makes the present moment feel squeezed.
Precisely. Less room for the now to expand. And this diminished presence, well, it leads us to that second factor, how present we are.
And kids, they're masters of being present, aren't they? Totally absorbed in whatever they're doing.
They're experts at flow. Lost in building a Lego tower, drawing, or just daydreaming, they're completely immersed.
And that ability to be so absorbed, that's crucial to how we experience time, isn't it?
McGilchrist argues that it is. But as we age, other things start to compete for our attention. Responsibilities, deadlines, anxieties.
And even when we try to relax, it's hard to switch off completely.
Right, our minds are still buzzing, maybe with to-do lists, maybe with replays of past events, regrets. It's harder to just be in the moment.
Instead of being fully present, our attention's fragmented, pulled in so many directions at once.
Exactly. Which brings us to that third factor,
Yeah.
novelty. Have you ever noticed how time seems to slow down when you're experiencing something new?
Oh, absolutely. That first trip abroad, starting a new job, those early days of learning a new skill, the days feel so much longer. The memories are so vivid.
Novelty captures our attention in a way that nothing else does. We're taking in all the details, making new connections, forming those strong memories. And for kids, the world is one big novelty.
Almost every experience is fresh and exciting.
But as we get older, well, routine takes over. The days can blur together if we're not careful.
So, to combat this feeling of time speeding up, McGilchrist suggests that we actively seek out new experiences, right?
Step outside our comfort zones, yeah. Try new things, shake up the routine. It's good advice in general, not just for our perception of time.
And he also emphasizes mindfulness, right? That practice of paying attention to the present moment.
It's not a magic bullet, it's a practice, something to cultivate. But even a few moments each day can make a difference. Think of it like training your attention to be more childlike again.
Curious, open, engaged with the world. It makes sense, trying to recapture that sense of wonder.
Exactly, and that shift in perspective, that choice to embrace the present, well, it can be a powerful antidote to the feeling that time is slipping away.
So we've got those strategies. Embrace novelty, cultivate mindfulness, and be aware of how much mental energy we're giving to past and future. But McGilchrist also critiques the way our culture views time itself, doesn't he?
He does. He points out that we often treat time as a commodity, something to be measured, managed, maximized. We talk about saving time, making time, trying to be as productive as possible with every minute of the day.
Always rushing, trying to get ahead. It's exhausting.
And it creates a sense of scarcity instead of appreciating each moment. We're always focused on what's next, what we haven't achieved yet, what we're falling behind on.
It's almost like we see time as an enemy to be conquered. No wonder we feel like it's slipping through our fingers.
And that's why a shift in perspective is so important. McGilchrist reminds us that time isn't a resource to be hoarded or spent. It's the fabric of existence itself.
It's the medium through which everything unfolds, the stage where all of life's experiences play out.
And to really grasp that, he says we need to go beyond that left hemisphere tendency to see time as this series of discrete, measurable units.
So not a rigid timeline, but more like a flowing river, constantly changing, shaping, and being shaped by everything around it.
That's beautiful imagery. And if we're caught up in anxieties about the future or regrets about the past, well, we miss the richness of that river, the present moment that's always unfolding.
This reminds me of another point McGilchrist makes, that things are secondary to processes. Our minds love to categorize, to label, to create those neat little boxes for everything.
Especially the left hemisphere. But in doing so, we often overlook the dynamic, ever-changing nature of reality. We crave stability, but the truth is, everything is in constant flux.
It's like trying to hold on to water. The tighter you grasp, the more slips away.
Exactly. A mountain isn't just a static object. It's a process of geological formation and erosion, always interacting with its environment. And a human being, we're not just a set of fixed traits, we're this. Symphony of thoughts, emotions, experiences, always evolving.
Even our identities, those stories we tell about ourselves, they're constantly being shaped and reshaped.
McGilchrist suggests that to really understand reality, we need to shift our focus from those static things to the dynamic processes that underlie them.
It's a subtle shift, but it feels really profound.
It is. Think of those mindfulness exercises where you focus on your breath. You're not trying to control it, just observing the process. The inhale, exhale, rise and fall of the chest.
It's about tuning into the reality of change, that constant flow.
And that brings us back to the right hemisphere.
How so?
The right hemisphere is less concerned with rigid categories, with control. It's more comfortable with ambiguity, with that fluidity and interconnectedness we were talking about.
So by embracing the right hemisphere's way of seeing, we could become more comfortable with change, with the flow of time itself.
Absolutely. It's a shift from that left hemisphere world of static things to a more right hemisphere world of dynamic processes. A world where change isn't something to fear, but to embrace as the very essence of life.
This is all so thought-provoking, but how does this understanding of process apply to something like, I don't know, our goals and aspirations? We need some sense of direction, right? A destination.
We do. But McGilchrist asks us to think about goals differently. What if, instead of fixating on the end result, we put more emphasis on the process itself?
So less about the what, the specific outcome, and more about the how, the way we approach the goal, the values we embody along the way.
Precisely. He suggests that true purpose might not be about reaching some fixed destination, but about embracing the journey itself, with all its unexpected detours and challenges.
That's such a different way of thinking about things, isn't it? Goes against so much of what we're taught about achievement.
It does, but it also opens up a whole world of possibility.
Yeah.
Imagine approaching your goals with more curiosity, openness, a willingness to adapt to whatever unfolds.
It sounds liberating, actually. Less pressure, more freedom to explore, to discover new things along the way.
And that spirit of exploration, that embrace of the unknown, it aligns so beautifully with the right hemisphere. A world of fluidity, emergence, that beauty of the present moment unfolding.
This is really making me rethink what it means to live a meaningful life. It's not just about ticking off accomplishments or reaching some arbitrary level of status or wealth. It's about how we engage with the process of living itself.
That's beautifully said. And it's one of the most powerful messages that McGilchrist offers. By shifting our focus from things to processes, from outcomes to the journey, we can tap into a much deeper well of meaning and purpose.
I'm really struck by how McGilchrist weaves together all these different fields, neuroscience, philosophy, psychology, even physics, to paint this incredibly rich picture of reality.
And he constantly challenges us to question our assumptions, to look beyond the surface, to consider different ways of seeing the world.
He really does. It's like he's giving us a whole new set of lenses through which to view our experience.
And the key to using those lenses, I think, lies in recognizing the power and the wisdom of that right hemisphere. It's about reclaiming those qualities of intuition, empathy, holistic awareness, those things that have been overshadowed by our culture's left hemisphere dominance.
It's about remembering that we're not just machines or bundles of data points. We're these complex, interconnected beings capable of so much more.
And by embracing the wisdom of both hemispheres, we can create a more balanced, meaningful, and ultimately a more humane world.
You know, it's fascinating how McGilchrist connects this idea of the right hemisphere to a sense of the sacred, the spiritual dimension of experience, something that often gets overlooked, wouldn't you say?
It's a really important point. He argues that the right hemisphere, with its ability to perceive the whole, to connect, to experience awe, well, it's essential for understanding those aspects of reality that go beyond the purely material, the purely rational.
It makes me think about how we often compartmentalize our lives, you know? Work, family, hobbies, spirituality, all separate boxes. But McGilchrist seems to be suggesting that true meaning comes from integration, seeing the interconnectedness of everything.
Exactly. And he challenges that idea that spirituality is about dogma or rituals or belonging to a specific religion. He sees it as a way of being in the world, a way of seeing that recognizes the sacred in the ordinary.
And that way of seeing, it really resonates with the right hemisphere, doesn't it? That capacity for wonder, for connecting with something larger than ourselves.
Absolutely. McGilchrist even suggests that the right hemisphere might be better equipped to grasp the concept of God than the left hemisphere.
Which makes sense, right? Because the left hemisphere wants to define, to categorize, to put God in a neat little box.
Right. It wants a clear and concise definition of the divine.
But the right hemisphere, it's comfortable with mystery, with the idea that there's always more to learn, more to experience.
Many spiritual traditions emphasize that unknowing, that letting go of our need to define and control. It's about opening ourselves to a deeper understanding, a more intuitive way of knowing.
So it's not about denying God or rejecting religious beliefs. It's about acknowledging the limits of our left hemisphere, understanding and embracing the right hemisphere's capacity for awe, wonder, connection.
Exactly.
This makes me think of Artists, musicians, poets, those who try to express the ineffable through their work, they're not explaining the divine, but evoking a sense of wonder, creating an experience that goes beyond the purely rational.
And you could say they're tapping into the wisdom of the right hemisphere, using metaphor, imagery, emotion to point towards truths that can't be fully captured in words.
It's like they're building a bridge between those two worlds, the left hemisphere's concepts and the right hemisphere's experience, helping us to connect with those deeper aspects of reality that our rational mind might miss.
A bridge that's so essential, because without it, we risk living in this flat, disenchanted world, a world stripped of meaning, beauty, connection.
So, where does this leave us? What's the takeaway from all of this?
Well, McGilchrist's work is a call to action, I think. An invitation to rebalance our own hemispheres, to cultivate those strengths of the right hemisphere alongside the analytical skills of the left, to recognize that both ways of seeing are essential for a full and meaningful understanding of the world.
And to challenge those aspects of our culture that overemphasize the left hemisphere's way of seeing, right? To remember that we're not just machines or data points, but these complex, interconnected beings with the capacity for creativity, empathy, and a deep connection to the mystery of existence.
And by embracing the wisdom of both hemispheres, we can create a richer, more fulfilling, ultimately more humane world.
It's been an incredible journey exploring Ian McGilchrist's The Matter with Things with you.
It has so many thought-provoking ideas.
To our listeners, we encourage you to delve deeper into his work and consider how your own brain hemispheres shape your experience of the world. Until next time, keep those minds curious.